Shall we make a start? So, hello everybody. Thanks for coming along. A little bit of a kind of level check to start off with. So, could you stick your hand up if you primarily work in testing as your craft? Awesome. How about development? Lovely. How about Scrum mastering, product ownership? What about something else? Awesome. Fantastic. Good. Right, so I am here to talk to you about that. So, hello. That is my Twitter. So that will, if you want ask me questions after this, I'm not here or you can't find me or whatever, please use that. I'm the VP of Engineering at a company called Bloom & Wild. Has anyone heard of Bloom & Wild? Brilliant. So what we do is we do flowers. So we're an online florist, and we send your flowers to you in specially designed flat boxes that go through your letterbox. So it means you can send flowers to people, and you don't have to tell them that they actually need to be in to get the surprise flowers, which is kind of nice. So you can all read. If you wanted to use that lovely service and 15% off, use my shortened name. You might be wondering why a VP of Engineering is standing up in front of you talking to you about testing. I've not had a typical kind of, you might say, career journey into my current role, so most of my background is in testing. So a little bit of development at the beginning, but then I've been a tester, a test manager. I've had some horribly named jobs while working in Nokia, like quality gate manager and stuff like that. And I've kind of settled myself now into running teams. And I'm here to talk to you about testing, because I think testing it's often misunderstood. I don't think enough people talk about it, and it's absolutely critical to successful delivery. I also co-curate a podcast called Testing in the Pub, where me and my friend Dan talk about all manner of things, software quality and software testing. You can find us on iTunes. Search for us, testinginthepub.com. Now, I thought I'd start with a bit of a story. So, I used to work at a major luxury e-commerce fashion retailer. You probably wouldn't notice, but hey. And I came in there as a test manager, and I was given responsibility for the regression test team. And this was a pretty big organization. There was about maybe 250 people in the overall IT organization. And about 15 different small development teams and the regression test team. And what would happen is every 3 weeks, 3 weeks worth of software from 15 teams would be thrown literally over a wall, because the regression test team was based in this little mezzanine, and the team would have a week to prove it worked, prove nothing had broken, and then basically rubber stamp it and let it out the door. And I remember one day I came in, and one of my automation engineers, he was sitting there, and he was at his desk, and his head was in his hands, and I walked over to him, and I said, "Well, what's wrong? What's wrong? You look really stressed. What's wrong?" And he said, "I can't make the tests pass." And I was like, oh my God. Lesson number 1, good testing isn't about making the tests pass, about somehow massaging your tests around your software. So we kind of saw the light a little bit in that organization, and we got rid of the regression test team. And we redistributed all these testers into the individual development teams. And we thought, brilliant, that will solve the problem. Most of those teams, or in fact all of those teams, were managed by people who had come up purely through a development background. And the testers went from feeling like a community and feeling supported to feeling very unsupported. And a lot of them left, particularly the good ones. And that taught me another lesson, which is that good testing is ultimately very often misunderstood. So what I hope to tell you today is a little bit about testing which is ugly, testing which is bad, and then we'll finish on testing is good. Obviously, in the title, I had to put it around the other way, or it would have sounded stupid. So, I thought I'd start with a question for you. So what is testing? If you had to come up with a one-sentence definition of what testing is, what would that be? Maybe spend 30 seconds or so just in your head. Have a think about it. If you had to come up with a single definition for testing, what would it be? Anyone brave enough to volunteer there? Okay, gentleman at the front. So, proving the software meets its acceptance criteria. Yep. Thank you. Anybody else? Someone at the back? Shout loudly. Exploring a hypothesis. Yep, I like that. It's good. One more, maybe? Yes, lady in the middle. A quality check. Yep, thank you. Thank you. This is what a lot of people think testing is. Trying the software, see if it works. Have a play with it. See whether it will be okay. Now, there's a bit of a problem with this. What does try mean? Try means lots of things to lots of different people in lots of different ways, in lots of different contexts, in lots of different scenarios. As does works. That's a highly contextual word. What works for me might not work for you. What works for your, product owner should, hopefully, if they're doing their job right, work for the customer, but you never know. It's not this. This is not testing. Park that thought. We will come back to it later. So let's talk about the bad first, because we want to end on a high. So let's talk about the bad first. These are things that make me a bit sad. These are things, misunderstanding about testing, misunderstandings about testers, and ultimately things that lead to waste and inefficient software delivery. Let's start with the first one. So this is often the typical view of a tester. So checking things. Writing test cases and test documentation and desperately trying to prove their worth by the amount of artifacts they can produce. Probably executing those test cases, running those test cases as well if we're really lucky. If we're in really bad testing world, somebody else is running those test cases. And if we're in really, really bad testing world, somebody in another country is running those test cases. So this is kind of button pushing, low entry, low skilled, awful. As an aside, I could watch that for hours. It's hypnotic. Please don't go to sleep. It's after lunch already. I had fish and chips for lunch. That was a mistake. Now, I've presented this a few times at testing conferences, and I've got a bit slapped on the wrist for picking on testers for doing that. So for balance, here is the bad tester's view of a developer. But this isn't good either, because this is what happens when we build walls and we silo and we get people to compete with each other. And it kind of got me interested, because I thought, well, where has this come from? How's this sprung up? How have we ended up in this situation? And kind of leads me back, interestingly enough, I'm old enough to kind of lead myself back to the 1980s. And this is where we started to build separate test teams. And we started to build separate test execution teams. And we started, once we'd made testing a phase, something you did after your development that you did in a separate team, then obviously the consultancies stepped in, things became outsourced. We built walls, we introduced huge amounts of waste. And it's summed up really nicely by this quote from a lady called Elisabeth Hendrickson, which is ultimately, it's all driven by the misguided belief that testers test, programmers code, and somehow the separation of these two things is important. You can't be a good tester if you talk to the developers, because you might learn things you shouldn't learn and lose your independence. It's ridiculous. As an aside, that book there, explore it. If you want to learn more about what good testing is, that is very, very highly recommended. I would really recommend you go out and you buy that. It will teach you a lot about how to do good, structured, exploratory testing. It's an absolutely brilliant book. So we ended up in this weird sort of situation where we built this wall up, or I kind of like to think of it now, it's like Wimbledon's on, right? So it's almost like a tennis game. You've almost got like, the net here, and you've got developer over here, and you've got like tester over here, and the tester's over here, and the tester's like, I found a bug, smack. The developer's over here is like, shit. Works on my machine. No, it doesn't. Which environment are you testing in? Staging. Come over here. I can't, I'm in another country. Try it on this build. No, still doesn't work. I did this and this and this. Hey, that's not fair. You didn't tell me about that in the first place. I fixed it. Is it in staging yet? Wait half an hour. Cameraman's going to hate me for this. It's okay. Oh, thank God. Bad testing happens when walls spring up. It happens when testers think it's their job to break things, and when we foster this idea that development is creative and testing is destructive, and we start counting bugs and communicating by bug reports, because that entire game of like really badly acted out tennis there, ultimately you can read it in comments in bug reports like company by company by company. Bad testing promotes all of this. And it makes me sad, because it's wasteful, and it's inefficient. And also, frankly, it's not actually very much fun to be a part of. I've yet to find anyone who actually wants to work in that sort of situation. And when I see bad testing promoted as good testing, or perhaps the best testing can get, that makes me even more sad. But it can get worse. It can get ugly. Now, I'm not going to ask you to put your hand up for any of these, but maybe just have a little bit of introspection, have a little bit of a think. Have you ever thought any of these things? No, you haven't, because for some random reason there appears to be no animations. Brilliant. Hello. That's better. I won't ask you to say whether you have. I can see it in your eyes, it's fine. No, these are the traits of what I would call ugly testing. And let's look at these in a little bit more detail. Let's look at the first one. So this idea that testing is somehow like a tax you have to pay. So I've done my development, I need to do my testing. I have to pay my testing tax. Good testing is not a tax, because good testing takes place across the entire life cycle. It takes place from the first idea and validation of the first idea through requirements, through designs, through the beginnings of code. Yes, it then happens towards the end as well. If you can do it with your customers, that's brilliant. But do not just do it at the end. It's kind of like tax at the end of the day, isn't it? It's like if you fill in a tax return and you dutifully fill in a spreadsheet every time you have to actually, like you spend some money, it makes doing your tax return really easy. If you chuck all your receipts in a big box and on the 31st of January you go, oh, tax return time, it's horrible, and you'll probably fail. So get your testers involved as early as you possibly can. You'll see how testers can add value. Don't think good testing only takes place at the end. How about this? So testing is just basically ultimately randomly clicking about and stuff. So we probably don't actually need any testers, because like our product manager does it for us with all their biases and their beliefs and their previous experiences and the lack of structure that they might apply to something. Because good testing takes skill and it takes training. And it's very typical, if I'm in an organization and I hear that gets me thinking. That's normally indicative of an organization that lacks the skills to put themselves in the minds and in the shoes of the user. That's what testers can help you do. They can help you put yourselves in the mind, in the shoes of your user. Now, you may not need testers right now. When I came into Bloom and Wild a couple of years back, we didn't have any testers, and testing was done by our product managers. And it was okay. It didn't come for free while they were doing that testing. They weren't doing something else. And there was a fair amount of kind of semi-random clicking about going on too. Now, good people that can put themselves in the mind of their users also come up through interesting and different backgrounds. Some of the best testers I've had working teams with me have come up through social science backgrounds and psychology backgrounds. They have a fascination with how our brains work and how we think, and with our sociology. That makes good testers. Now, when I don't see people understanding that value, it does make me a bit sad. But testers are not immune to this either. And this is kind of like my little bugbear. It's like, testers are not there to break stuff. I wish everyone would stop saying that. There's a couple of reasons, really. Ultimately, if there's a bug in a piece of software, it is actually broken anyway. But this idea that testers are there to break stuff is, again, it builds walls. If we say we're there to break stuff, we've immediately turned off the people that we really need to be integrating and identifying with. Because a tester's job is ultimately to help a team own quality and to investigate and to experiment. Value is found whether there are bugs found or whether there are not. And that's the tester's job. It's not to break software, it's to investigate that software. And we can't do that just by following scripts. Click this, look at this, click this, look at this. If you make your instructions so blindingly simple that anyone could follow them, then you will miss so much. You will lose that creativity, that curiosity. That's where good exploratory testers can take a critical eye and view on a piece of software as they explore it. They'll know how deep to go down one path before coming out and coming back and going down another path and exploring something else. A lot of what they're exploring, they don't have a clue about before they started, but they have the heuristics, they have the oracles that enable them to do that. If you rely just on scripts, you'll probably find that the scripts will always pass, but all the stuff the scripts didn't even think about, that's where you might have problems. So, I thought we could do a little experiment, because I've talked for long enough. So with that in mind, that investigative, exploratory thought in mind, I would like you to turn to the person next to you, or maybe in a group of 2 or 3, and I would like you, we'll spend 5 minutes on this, generate some test ideas for this. There is a microphone going around if anybody does want to ask me any questions.
Who are the users for it?
Good question. Who are the users for that? The users are people in my fictional testing wine bar.
And what is it supposed to hold?
It holds liquid.
What is the maximum temperature of the liquid?
Ooh.
What's the minimum temperature?
Good questions.
These fictional people, how ham-fisted are they?
They are very daintily fingered, and they exist only in environments between 4 and 25 degrees C. Thank you. I'll get out of the chair. It looks like I'm being really lazy, but these chairs have been bugging me. They've been sat on the stage, and like no one sat in them for anything I've seen, so I thought I would. Yes?
What do you intend to use it for?
In my fictional wine bar, I intend to use it as a serving device.
Okay. You could use it as a musical instrument.
I could do. Yeah.
Any more?
Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll spend maybe another 30 seconds thinking about ideas. Oh, one more over there.
What material is it made out of?
It's made out of glass. Oh, lady kind of midway up.
No, you won't. Just relax. Does this mean you're going to give us all a glass of wine?
No, but I hear someone's... That's a great idea. Come to the keynote. Apparently there'll be beer. I'll feed it back to the organisers. What's the expected lifespan? I don't have much money, so I would like this to last at least a year. And preferably not be stolen. Okay. So, hopefully, through kind of that discussion you've had and those ideas you've generated, you've kind of asked yourself some critical questions. And you've asked yourself some questions about what this is, for example. I mean, this could just be a picture of a wine glass, for example. And I could have just asked you to test that. When I was on the train on the way down, I did a little bit of a mind map, because I like mind maps. Mind maps are great for exploring test ideas. Now, this could, for example, also be your test cases, and it could also be your test report, because it gives me enough information. So, for example, questions I ask myself. Should I look at things like the sturdiness of this glass? How supportive it is, the angle I could push it over at before it fell over? How long is it supposed to last, as the gentleman down the front said? Height, depth, different dimensions. What's the capacity? Are there some regulations on that capacity? What's it for? What are we going to try and put in it? We're going to try and put in wine, but what sort of wine? If it's a sherry glass, it's probably going to want to be smaller. I don't think I want that entire glass full of sherry, even here. Are there some risk areas? Is it perhaps too fragile? Does it not hold enough liquid? Is the base wide enough to ensure that it doesn't keep falling over? And the really obvious one, so obvious I put it in yellow, is it actually for drinking wine out of? Yes, it is. So these all work really effectively as a way of exploring a system. And that's essentially what you've done there. You've explored a system, and that system is that wine glass. Okay, so doing that is good. What else is ugly? This is ugly. This idea that we can automate everything. Because it's bad testing creeping back in again. It's almost like I define myself by the number of automated scripts I can write, the number of artifacts I can produce, the number of things I have created, because I must create to prove my worth. And it kind of got me thinking, how have we got to this? And I think it's this that's kind of the problem. So those of us who do significant amounts of development or come up through development backgrounds, we want to anchor things in our own context. And so we make them into development problems. And then we incentivize our testers to write a load of automated scripts. And then we get surprised when we've got buggy, fragile test suites. And they become bloated and unusable. And this one. So actually, all you testers, it's just a stepping stone onto something better, isn't it? Let's be honest. It's not. It's a serious, very, very valuable craft. And yes, some testers can learn a little bit more about code. Some developers can learn a lot more about testing. Imagine how it would feel if somebody was belittling your career, something that's really dear to you. I think a lot of very good testers leave the testing industry because of this. As an aside, good place to learn about good testing, Ministry of Testing. Okay, that makes me very sad, that one. Something else that makes me very sad is when we think that like somehow we can have a delivery process where there's like a safety net at the end. I mentioned at the beginning, I used to be a quality gate manager at Nokia, with my team manning this quality gate. And it was just, boom, it was like that. It wasn't going to work. Nokia was nice, though. Nokia liked career progression. I became a senior quality gate manager. Maybe I've got a bigger gate, I don't know. Testing's most valuable when we spread it out across the life cycle. Test early, test often. Don't put your testers in the position where you're saying, why didn't you find that bug? Why didn't you catch that? That's not where the value is. Think of it as a team. So, that's enough of the bad and the ugly. Let's talk about the good. Let's end on a high. So, what is good testing? Ultimately, the sorts of things you should be caring about in any team, in any company, you should be caring about the speed at which you can actually get changes to your users. You should be caring about business impact. Your competition is only getting faster. Let's use, I don't know, the flower industry as an example. You could buy flowers from Bloom and Wild, you could buy flowers from Interflora, you could buy flowers from Marks and Spencer's. If we do it well, you'll buy flowers from us. It means there's no time to be inefficient. It means you need people who can help make that process that as efficient as possible. And I think those people are testers. And this is what good testing enables, ultimately. Good testing reduces risk. It helps you understand risk. It's nothing more, nothing less. As a team, this is what it is. Only you will know what is appropriate. Only you will know what, in your context, is appropriate quality. Let's use an example. I mean, anyone here used to play Pokemon Go? It's not quite so trendy now, is it? Yeah. Oh, there we go. One hand goes up, they all go up. When Pokemon Go launched, the quality of it was not actually very good at all. It was buggy as hell, but that didn't matter because it was a really good idea, and it made lots and lots and lots of money. They made the right decision. They decided what their appropriate quality level was, and they went ahead. And that was cool. That probably wouldn't be right in a highly regulated industry. It would be very, very wrong. But for Pokemon, it was absolutely right. Now, we say appropriate, we say quality. What is quality, ultimately? I like this definition of quality. So, again, if you want to know more about good testing, these two gentlemen here are very good people to follow. That's obviously not the long-haired, permed 1980s rocker. It's like a middle-aged, bald Canadian guy with a hat. But James Back and Michael Bolton, they've taken, this is actually a quote from the late, great Jerry Weinberg. So he said quality is valued to some person. They added who matters. So testing doesn't equal quality. We can't test quality into a product. And testers aren't responsible for quality, just like agile coaches aren't responsible for delivery. But they're not the quality police either. What they are there to do is to help teams understand quality. Bugs, for example, will threaten that quality. They'll threaten that value. Misunderstood requirements will threaten that value. Who matters? You know who matters. It's probably the customer. It might be the stakeholders. It might be the product owner. It might be somebody else. It's contextual. Now, remember our quote from earlier, and we said, it's not this. Because the problem is, this is your kind of idea of testing, have a play with it, see how it is. You can be ignorant of a huge amount of stuff. So who's heard of the orders of ignorance model? Nobody. Great. I'll go from the beginning then. So, this can be applied to a lot of different things, and it's very, very good. And it kind of helps explain the popular quote from Donald Rumsfeld from a few years ago about known knowns and unknown unknowns that everyone took the mickey out of him about, whereas what he was actually saying was really sensible. So there are different orders of ignorance. There is order of ignorance, 0th order of ignorance. So a lack of knowledge, or rather a lack of ignorance. So I know something. So let's say, for example, I know about testing, and I know about automation, and I know having a lot of unit tests is a good thing. Now, I might be working, I don't know, on a Rails app, and I might not know how to use RSpec to actually write those unit tests. So I have first order ignorance. So I have a lack of knowledge. But crucially, I know how to get that knowledge. So there's a million and one places. Maybe there's someone on my team. Maybe there's a book, a blog I can read. Now, imagine I don't even know that I need unit testing. I'm completely, totally, and marvelously unaware that I need it. I'm suffering from second order ignorance. So a lack of awareness. I don't know something. Now imagine, not only do I not know something, I don't know it, but I have absolutely no way of discovering it. So there is no process there that allows me to understand how I could go about learning that knowledge I don't know. Now, good testing can help you with all of these. If we apply the order of ignorance model, there is one other order of ignorance, which is very cheeky. It's you don't know about the order of ignorance model, which is actually like fourth order of ignorance. So what is good testing? Testing, if we separate it out, that process of evaluating a product by learning about it and exploring it can help us with our first order ignorance, so we don't know something. Our second order, we don't know it, but we might go on an exploratory journey which will help us uncover it, and we don't have a process to even understand this software. We can explore it. Now, if we call that out compared with checking, which is that process of making algorithmic decision points in a product, like you might do with automation, that's great for telling you whether you don't know something. I expected this and I didn't get it. So it's great for stuff in some sort of functional automation pyramid, because no testing talk is a testing talk without one of these in. Unless, of course, you draw that little ice cream thing on the top and write manual testing in it, which really annoys me, but I don't have time to rant about that. Automation can be great, though, because it can actually allow you to do a whole bunch of things that you can't do and that can support your exploratory testing too. So it's really important. Good testing does all of this. It reduces risks for appropriate quality across a team. So please do automate a lot of things as a team. Please do that. Please automate where it makes sense. And please bear in mind that you can do things like data setup with automation that then helps your exploratory testing. We used to have a little tool called the ICL Test Helper in one of the companies I worked at. And the ICL Test Helper, which had an alternative name, if you change some of the words around, I can see the gentleman there gets that, that did data setup. And it made us much more efficient at exploratory testing because we didn't have to input all that data manually. But just bear in mind that automation can't do all of this stuff. So there's a huge amount of stuff your automation cannot do. It's not going to test claims about your product. It's not going to test user reactions and look and feel and that perception of performance. Certainly not going to tell you if you need more tests. It doesn't understand your business. It can't reason or look for inconsistency or ambiguity or, frankly, outright contradiction either. Because you can only automate what you know and what you expect. So automation suffers from second-order ignorance, ultimately. Automation doesn't know what it doesn't know and blindly carries on anyway. And you go, my test suite's passed, brilliant. Oh, shit, it's all busted in production. That's where good exploratory testing comes in. So don't automate everything, because you need to bear in mind all this stuff. Who is debugging and maintaining those tests? Can you scale your team to keep up? How quickly are those tests generating any value? I'd recommend using T, because I'm an Englishman. No. The reason I recommend you use T is because T is great at exploiting present bias, this tendency that we overvalue immediate rewards, and we don't go off and do something else. So the general heuristic I give my teams when they're talking about automation in particular is, does your automated test suite run in the time it takes me to get out of my seat, kick it off, get out of my seat, go to the kitchen, make myself a cup of tea, maybe have a look out of the window, come back, sit down, get my results. If it does that, I don't move on to something else, I get the immediate reward, I do something about it. It also handily stops those test suites becoming massive, bloated, and frankly, unmaintainable. So while you are doing that, these are the sorts of things your good exploratory testers should be doing. They should be there helping your team. They should be testing these things. Everything, ultimately, can be tested. Now, this could mean less testers. I think this does mean less testers. This is the Bloom and Wild engineering team at the moment. You'll note, even if you're colorblind, that there is only one tester in there. who kind of hops around between the different teams to the point of greatest need. So you may well need less testers, but please, please, you need good ones. Deborah helps all of these teams understand what quality is and how they can own it. So, if we need testers, how can we get the best out of them? Well, firstly, we can build a culture that values testing and values testers. Because ultimately, culture is that behavior as managers, for example, that we reward and we punish. So encouraging developers and testers to talk to each other, avoiding that curse of knowledge, and ensuring that the communication is at a level that everybody understands and that makes nobody feel stupid. Upskilling, training, pairing, 3 Amigos sessions, supporting those testers in the teams is really, really important. And also encouraging those testers to go and seek support in the wider testing community. Because there are usually less testers in a team than there are developers. It can sometimes be a bit of a lonely place. So ensure you work to hook those testers in with other testers, either in the same company or outside. They'll need that support. Build processes that gets value from testing and testers. When I was testing, the smaller the batch job you gave me, the smaller the piece of work you gave me, the happier I was. Because it set my boundaries nicely and enabled me to work through. Not, please test the website and check it still works. That I did not like. So that focus on finishing, let's say a Kanban board that doesn't have a ready for QA column in it, or even a QA column at all in it, really, really important. Making automation a team activity and smoothing the flow through a deployment pipeline as a result, and a delivery pipeline, really, really important. The tester is the constraint, maybe. They're busy, right. What's the developer doing? They're doing some of the automated checks. Very important. Getting those testers involved as early as possible, bridging the gaps in that team, really important. And build an organization that ultimately gets value from testing and testers. So the best thing that ever happened to me is I was a test manager, and we had an agile transformation, and we got rid of all test managers. That's the single best thing that happened in my career. At the time, it was horrible, but with the benefit of hindsight, I thought a lot of things that were stupid. And I did it because I was isolated, and my team was isolated, and they had the same sorts of mindsets. Because ultimately, teams value quality. And that's the tester's job. The tester's job is to help a team understand what quality means. Because nobody wants to do bad work. Everybody wants to do their best when they come to work. But sometimes they just don't know what good looks like. Good testers are like glue. They glue teams together around a common goal. They help them identify what adds quality. So what is good testing? Ultimately, it means testers do less testing, but they enable more testing to happen. And that good testing takes place across the whole life cycle. It happens with automation. It happens without automation. That automation exploits that present bias. It's short and quick and punchy. And if you build an organization and a culture that ultimately values good testing, everybody will benefit. So, if you remember the quote from earlier, what is testing? This is the late, great Jerry Weinberg. If you've never read anything by Jerry Weinberg, read things by Jerry Weinberg. He wrote a lot, and it's all fantastic. Systems thinking, consulting, testing. This is Jerry's quote about testing. So ultimately, good testing involves balancing the need to mitigate risk against the risk of trying to gather too much information. In other words, it's all about risk, and as a good tester, you know when to stop. And so, I shall. Thank you.